really need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
And good morning. This is Dave Debo. Today on the program, Tesha Parker will be here. She's really been inspired by her grandmother's good works on the East Side, serving people in need. She is the founder of a group called Rooted in Love. And as always, we'll hear from her, I think, in the best way. Boots on the ground, grassroots, whatever really you want to call it. But a really informed look coming up with Jay Moran at what the community still needs. And obviously, in light of the top shooting on 5/14, what has changed over there. So that's coming up in a little bit. Tesha Parker with us. But first, Terry Alford is here. He's the executive director of the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. They've launched a strategic action plan. It's more than really just that archway that you've probably seen or the Michigan Avenue Baptist Church. They have a lot of plans on tap to develop and recognize Buffalo's African American history, especially in that area, making that area kind of a tourist destination. Terry, thanks for being here. Welcome.
It's good to be here, Dave, and thank you for having me.
Part of the reason I think why I wanted to have you on today is for the past 4 weeks on PBS, Henry Louis Gates Jr. has been presenting a series on PBS called Making Black America. The idea is that there are spaces that were formed by blacks from even as far back as antebellum days all the way up to the civil rights movement, black spaces where they could network, socialize, and even, I guess, in a limited way, be independent or at least to some degree free of the discrimination that was around there. I think a lot of people think of maybe Harlem of the 20s, but there is more to it than that. Terry Alford, again, from the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. Do such places exist here still today?
Oh, sir, absolutely they do. I'm a huge fan of the good Dr. Henry Louis Gates, as you know, Dave.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we pride ourselves in with our Heritage Corridor is the great stories that come with it that's attached or connected to individuals, especially individuals that were connected to certain social institutions or organizations, fraternal orders. And that holds true even with our corridor, with the history of the African-American experience in the city of Buffalo. So when you look at our Heritage Corridor, Michigan Street, which is about 3.5 miles of it, it sort of is emblematic of about 185 years of the African-American experience in, culture, really impacting positively the cultural and economic significance of this city and the entire western region of Buffalo. So, yes, they still do exist. It's emblematic of the Michigan Street Baptist Church that we talked about earlier, which served as one of the last stations of the Underground Railroad, but it also included the Reverend J. Edward Nash House that was home to the longest-serving pastor of the church, along with his wife Frances and son Jesse, who later became a college professor at Canisius College. And it especially includes the Colored Musicians Club right across the street. And I have to tell you, Dave, if you haven't been in this part of the city, they're basically steps away from each other. And I like to tell people when I do presentations that, in many cases, these were basically like 3 degrees of separation. Started with the church, with folks coming out of the church and starting all these other institutions that begat other institutions along the corridor.
I think the Gates premise is that they were places, again, outside of the white gaze, places where people could network, where they could almost work to try and be independent of the discrimination that was otherwise rampant outside those doors.
Absolutely. So examples of that starts with the church, for instance. In the African American community, in terms of our culture, and not much different than other cultures, it starts with the church,
Yeah.
where people congregate and worship. But the church is more than that. It becomes more than that. It becomes a social institution of discussion and learning and networking. And so when we talk about the Michigan Street Baptist Church, those individuals that frequented that church, they were members of the Masons and the Eastern Stars, the Phyllis Wheatley Club. They were members of, in those days, the first semblances of social justice organizations in the guise of people or individuals like Mary Talbert, who herself was a social justice champion, women's rights, civil rights champion. So when you talk about these relationships, these networks at that church, right next to the church is where Mary Talbert lived, and she and Pastor Reverend Nash entertained greats, national greats of the day, advocates and champions of civil rights and social justice, including people like W.E.B. Du Bois. And it was at her home where they, along with W.E.B. Du Bois and other national greats of the
Niagara
day,
movement.
They created the Niagara movement.
Which was a forerunner of the NAACP?
That's absolutely right.
Founded here in Buffalo. And
founded here in Buffalo.
I don't think that's maybe as readily known as perhaps you want it to be.
And it's our job to make it more readily known, obviously. But when you look at Reverend Nash's wife, her brother, Raymond Jackson, who was a member of the church as well, founded the semblance of the union, the Black Musicians Union, because Black musicians weren't accepted in white unions. So they started their own out of necessity.
And that became the Colored Musicians Club.
And that became the Colored Musicians Club.
But there were also venues where there's a plaque now. The building's not there, but like the Little Harlem.
Absolutely. So again, these are examples of great stories of especially structures that don't exist anymore, but still hold the same power and importance in our community, and when I say our heritage, not just African American heritage, but all of our heritage. If you call yourself Buffalonian. So Little Harlem was an iconic club or establishment well before the club was even in existence. But in those days, that's where musicians came. They came to Buffalo, or those that resided here. If they needed work, that's where they went. But the Little Harlem served more than just being a club. It was a place where people socialized and, again, more importantly, networked. I'd like to also mention to your listeners, further north up the street from these iconic places that don't exist anymore was the Michigan Street YMCA, which was founded by Reverend Nash and some other leaders of the day. And for some, it holds as much reverence as the church does. African Americans that were migrating from the north after Civil War during antebellum days, and right into the early parts of the Industrial Revolution in our city, if you will. The first place they stopped was at the YMCA because that's where they were given lodgings and things that they sort of figured it out. And at that place, they were given and provided networks and support and all types of things that allowed them to be successful residents of the city.
You and Gates both mentioned the Masons, the Prince Hall Masons. The Eastern Star is the ladies' auxiliary, basically, for the Masons. But what about I heard you say the Phyllis Wheatley Club Association? I've never heard of that one.
So the Phyllis Wheatley Association was a women's group, a women's organization, national organization, and Mary Talbert again and Mrs. Frances Nash, the Reverend's wife, started the club in Buffalo. And in those days, again, this was an example of the leaders of the day creating networks in order to make, to bring coalitions together, to support each other, but to also look at ways of progressing the race, progressing opportunities. So Phyllis Wheatley Club was one of those examples, those organizations that was brought into this area, namely by these two women leaders of the day. And again, that sort of served as examples. There's all types of social organizations and civic organizations that still exist today. We're not even talking about the fraternal and sorority orders yet.
And to some degree, this again is part of, I think, the Gates premise, but maybe yours. To some degree, these places existed outside the white gaze. I don't think I know much about them. I don't know if people of color in Buffalo know a lot about them, probably more than I do. But it sounds as if they really were, at the time, unnoticed and were this underground network, so to speak.
And that's the great story about the storytelling that Dr. Henry Louis Gates is incorporating here. That's the message that he keeps drumming in, that out of necessity, our people had to do these things, and it wasn't exclusive. Okay, they were always as a people, we've always been very inclusive, but just out of necessity, we had to create our own networks because they weren't networks that were created for us. And when we look at the unfortunate events of 514, this past summer, that casts a magnifying glass, as you know, Dave, on those social ills that still that we as people still face. Okay, that it just doesn't negatively impact my people, but impacts all of us, economically and socially and otherwise. And as a result of that, I think sometimes what we lose, like any other organizations, especially young people, is really explaining the importance and the reasons why, it's important to have these linkages and these networks. It's not so much out of just survival. It's just out of necessity and out of the pride that was instilled in us long ago by our forefathers and foremothers, that if we don't do it for ourselves, there's no one else going to be out there to do it for us.
I'm reminded of the Shirley Chisholm quote: "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own chair." And in a lot of ways, that's what this was. Excluded from society at large, excluded from white society. Let's create our own community.
Mm-hmm. And we still struggle with that. Great thing with what we're doing with the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor, and you mentioned about our strategic action plan that we have great pride in, is we spent a year developing this plan. I think one of the more proud things that I am in terms of being a part of the development of that plan is we spent a year building consensus amongst people in the community itself. And this is well before 514 occurred. And the reason for that is there's been plans in the past in our corridor and in east side of Buffalo, but they really didn't gain any traction because there was no synergy, no funding, but more importantly, no community support. And so the reason why we spent a lot of time consensus building, again, emblematic of what our foremothers did with creating these networks and opportunities to talk and discuss things, is to allow for folks in the community garner some ownership out of a plan that they feel they helped create. So over the course of that year, we had several community engagement sessions with different buckets of people: elders, young people, young professionals, academians, elected officials, you name them, we talked to them and focus grouped them to death too. But what we gleaned from the day was just validating with some things that we already knew, that in terms of a vision, creating a vision for this corridor moving forward. So, I'm reminded, with the Henry Louis Gates episodes that, sometimes you have to start at the grassroots level. That's that corny term people like to use. You have to start where people are to create the transformational change that we all deserve.
All right, when we come back from the break, we'll talk more about the strategic plan. We'll look at the future, perhaps, of the corridor. Terry Alford is here. He's Executive Director of the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor Commission. We'll be back with more of him right after this. This is Buffalo What's Next.
Check out the Our Town series produced by WNED PBS, but captured by community members on the Buffalo Toronto Public Media YouTube channel.
Ellicottville is a town of variety, not only in what they have to offer, but the people.
The Burlington community is becoming increasingly multicultural, and the library is reflecting that.
Parks and playgrounds have been what makes the town of Tonawanda a great place to grow up.
The series began in 2003, but it's making its debut on YouTube now. Although some of the businesses and people may have changed over the years, the spirit of these wonderful towns remain the same.
We just didn't realize what we had in our own backyard.
We need the next generation to protect it and carry on.
Learn about Jamestown, Burlington, Welland, East Aurora, and more than a dozen other beautiful communities in our region by watching the Our Town series now on YouTube.
I would live there.
Hey, have you seen WNED PBS's Compact Science or Shakespeare's Greatest Hits? Here's 5 reasons to check them out. Compact Science is so fun, high energy, and educational that it won 3 prestigious awards: a Communicator Award, a Telly, and an award from the New York State Broadcasters Association. And Shakespeare's Greatest Hits also received a Communicator Award and a Telly for cinematically portraying some of Shakespeare's best monologues in bite-sized videos. Check them out at WNED.org or on YouTube.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And this is Dave Debo, continuing our discussion with Terry Alford from the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor Commission. Before the break, Terry, you said something that I think was surprising to me. I think of the 4 linchpins there: the Colored Musicians Club, the Nash House, the Michigan Street Baptist Church, and even to some degree WUFO Radio. Mm-hmm. Those to me are like the 4 keystone locations. But you said this corridor is 3.5 miles. Mm-hmm. That surprises me. I thought of it as literally the block around those 4 places. Describe the rest of the corridor.
So I'm happy you asked that question, because I always preface it by saying I'm a product of the community itself.
All right.
I was born and raised in the Fruit Belt area of the city.
Not too far from there.
Not too far from the corridor itself. And in my early years, my family lived in and around different neighborhoods: Maston Park, Cold Spring area, the historic Willard Park. Okay, so all these are historic neighborhoods that connect to the corridor itself. You know, our mantra is we serve as a commission as the connection of the past, present, and future for those historic neighborhoods that connect within and beyond the corridor itself. So when you look at the 3.5 miles, it's considered the arterial of the African American community. Again, it represents about close to 185 years of the African American experience in the city of Buffalo, and it transforms over many generations. Many periods of that include the abolitionist movement, the civil rights movement, the suffragette movement as well, and the jazz period. Okay, it's all reflected in this community. And this 3.5 miles of the community, I remember growing up. I won't give my age out here. I think you're still older than I am, but I won't go there, Dave. But,
that's okay. My beard is grayer, which is probably the reason you say that.
So, I remember a vibrant neighborhoods that boasted, really successful businesses, entertainment centers, and residents that were all proud. They worshiped, played, commerced with each other. So if you go down along the corridor, and we like to say our corridor starts from Michigan and William Street and goes to the Freedom Wall at Michigan and East Ferry, you see many different stages of many developments happening all along this corridor. That's very exciting because we're in a period of renewal, if you will.
All right, so put that in the context of your strategic plan. How do you take what you have and develop it to whatever that next level may be?
Okay, so the next level, focusing on heritage tourism, is what our focus is on the strategic action plan that complements those 4 anchors that we talked about. We see heritage tourism as the economic engine that will help transform the economic development of the entire rest of the corridor. So, as we talked earlier, in the late 60s, right through the 70s, there was a term called urban renewal that knocked down a lot of businesses and historic structures of the day with the promise of rebuild that never happened. You talk over 60 years of this now. So we see this heritage tourism as the linchpin, to sort of drive this economic development. So through our strategic action plan, we have capital funding from Empire State Development, who created what's called the Eastside Economic Development Fund some years ago.
And they have engineered that around corridors, one of them being yours.
One of them being ours. The other three includes Jefferson Avenue, Bailey Avenue, what they call Bailey Green, and the Fillmore Broadway area. And within those four corridors, this capital investment, if you will, focuses on 9 different projects, 3 of which is in my corridor, the anchors themselves, but it also includes like Central Terminal, Broadway Market, MLK Park, and the whole point of this investment is to hopefully use this as a means of spurring economic development in all these corridors. And if we do that, then you see a rapid improvement, hopefully, of the East Side that has been long marginalized and ignored with this type of opportunity.
Is the goal to have someone from Cleveland, Boulder, Colorado, wherever, say, I want to learn about African American history, Buffalo has some cool sites, let's come to Buffalo? Or is the goal more, I'm visiting Niagara Falls, Buffalo has a cool city hall, let's go over here to the Michigan Street corridor as well?
Both.
I had a hunch you'd say that.
Both of all that.
Let me ask about the first one, though. You really think that we are enough of a destination to draw people to Buffalo specifically for your corridor?
Well, I'll answer it this way. We already are. We don't even have our capital projects, which is expansion, stabilization of our historic buildings right now. Even despite the challenges of a pandemic, what we found with our research, with our metrics, is people have continued to come to Buffalo, in particular to this corridor, with their families from as far away as Pennsylvania, New York City, Ohio, Toronto, western part of Canada. So we're already kind of like creating partnerships with sister destinations like the Niagara Falls Center over there, Broderick Park, Friends of Broderick Park, and all points in between to sort of create these linkages. We're even actually looking at trying to create a partnership in Ontario where we know Harriet Tubman once resided. Her church is still there. So, as you know, many freedom seekers found their way there.
This was the final way station, Buffalo,
exactly.
Broderick Park,
right? The
final way station on the Underground Railroad before Canada.
Absolutely. So I think your question is a very important question. I just want your listeners to know this, that we are already doing those things. We've already seen great success. Now, once we start actually completing our vision in terms of building out those 4 anchors with their stabilization and renovations and things which they're very exciting, and I don't have time to talk about it today. I would just suggest that your listeners go online to MichiganStreetBuffalo.org, and they can see the plan in all its glory. But we're also looking
to summarize it quickly. Step 1 is improve the facilities. Step 2 is promote the heck out of it.
Promote the heck out of it. We're also doing economic development. So we received a couple grants over this past summer. One was from HUD through Senator Charles Schumer. That was $300,000. Another $50,000 from the National Trust to focus on developing economic development in the corridor that complements these anchors. So the whole idea, Dave, is we don't just want people to come and visit these beautiful historic edifices. We want to keep them in the corridor, okay, to spend their dollars with their family, to enjoy restaurants or green space or nearby entertainment venues or activities that we'll be promoting, once all this plan is in place. Right now, we're working on the short term, which in between 2 to 3 years, we hope to see all this happening already.
And that's the point where it would spin off into the Fruit Belt, or it could cascade up Jefferson to the area around the Tops. That's the the broadest plan?
Yeah, if I like to use the example of Larkinville. So,
sure.
So when you look at when Howard Zimsky developed the Larkin building, okay, I don't know if he had the master plan in his head what that would spur, but the economic reverberations. So it's if you're throwing a small pebble in a puddle of water, and you see what reverberates out from that. And if you go to Larkinville, you see at all points, all directions, the economic, progress that was a result of developing that building. And we hope to, replicate that in this part of the corridor, in the southern tip of the corridor.
I have to ask you, without the anchors that you have on the Michigan Street corridor, how do you see increased development or investment? Because they always say there's disinvestment. How do you see increased investment around Cold Spring, Jefferson?
So, we see it as I like to term it as a domino effect. So, when you see success and, you see others wanted to emulate that success. So you look at best practices, but we definitely see that with the smart investment of these funds that, strategically, focuses on different areas of the East Side, then they sort of work with each other, When I go in and talk to anybody about this corridor, they automatically assume that we represent African-American community in general, no matter what corridor it is.
Because you're a monolith, right?
Right. So we're connected that way with other cultural assets on the east side of Buffalo, especially that promotes the African-American experience. So to answer your question more succinctly, yes, we have to start somewhere. Once we start seeing success, as in the vision of actual women and minority-owned businesses with successful businesses, that we think is going to reverberate in all points on the east side of Buffalo, and that's really the strategy of the economic development, East Side Economic Development Fund. That's the whole point of this investment.
You've led me perfectly to my favorite final question. Broadly speaking, what does Buffalo need?
What does Buffalo need is a more of a commitment to hear and allow for more voices, to have more voices directly from the community at the table to talk not just about the ills of what's happening or befalling our community or the city of Buffalo, but to come up with solutions. Whenever I go and talk to any group and they always spew all the ills, my first question is, so what's your solution? What's your idea to turn things around? I think if our city leaders allow for that more of that opportunity and not wait for a tragic event to happen or to occur before we start opening up to other people, I think this city will be so much farther and so much better for it.
And you're optimistic?
I'm very optimistic.
All right. Terry, thanks for being here. This was great.
Thank you, Dave.
Terry Alford is the Executive Director of the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor Commission. Stay with us. Jay Moran is next with Tesha Parker, Rooted in Love. This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
Watch the WNED PBS original production, Frederick Law Olmsted, Designing America.
What his parks are all about is finding immensely practical solutions to the problem of building a dream in the middle of a city.
Frederick Law Olmsted, Designing America, now streaming on YouTube and the PBS video app.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter @WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And back here on Buffalo What's Next. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Tesha Parker with us right now. She is the founder of Rooted in Love, Inc., and she is with us this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Tesha, so much about your organization we need to talk about. You've been doing this now for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the really interesting parts right off the bat, something you mentioned to me, and I want to follow up on this a little bit, that when it comes to minority-led nonprofits,
Yeah.
what, 10% past a year? Is that what you told me?
Yeah, it's less than 10% actually make it due to, funding. A lot of people really don't have the resources and understanding of really how much it takes that goes into funding and founding and every sort of position that really is needed and necessary for a successful nonprofit. I mean, when I started, I had absolutely no experience. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue on exactly what it would take. And it took me 4 years to even get out of funding it privately myself. So, I mean, definitely the funding and the feedback to understand how to get to the next level is such an issue.
So when you talk about how difficult it is, the one question that pops in mind, and probably a lot of people listening right now, why do it? Sometimes you have to ask yourself that question.
I do ask myself that question. But, for me personally, it was something that we were raised to do. Like, my grandparents always kind of drilled into us how, we're put on this earth to help other people. We are here to grow and contribute to what essentially makes other people better, and in turn then you're made better and you're fulfilled and you're whole. So for me, this was sort of a path that I wanted to take to kind of start like a redemption journey, so to speak. And then it kind of turned into, I really love doing this, and this is where my heart is, where my passion is. It's given my family a rebirth with our relationships, and it was a way for us to kind of have our glue, especially since it was based off of my grandmother. And, with her passing away right before our first event, it was a way for us to all kind of remain together. So it just motivates me to still build those partnerships and have like that piece of her since she's not here.
If you go to the website, which is rootedinloveinc.com, you can read the story. And it's a lovely story about your grandmother, that she inspired this because of the type of person she was for her community. Talk about your grandmother. What was her name?
Louise. Oh, she was such a gem. She was the, grandmother to every person on the street. She was the mom. She was a school teacher. So she worked in Buffalo Public Schools, and she saw what it was like, to have a lot of kids that didn't have a, family system that was positive. And she was just that light when it came to dealing with each and every person. I mean, it was so surreal to like think about it now. And growing up, it was always normal. She would have all of her former students, or she would have random people that were homeless or didn't have any place to go, that maybe didn't have parents. All of the holidays were filled with them coming, them being in her home, or we would show up and, she would have a random person sleeping in her extra room because that's the type of person that she was. So it was such a beautiful way to cement her legacy and continue to get that out to people that, that didn't know her, to still experience her.
Are we seeing, does this take us back to a time then perhaps where a street, a neighborhood was maybe a little bit different than it is today, that there could be these families together that were looking out for each other, looking out for the folks who, maybe needed a little help or maybe needed a lot of help?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that her home is reminiscent of that. I mean, that was her legacy when she was alive, and now us being located out of her home.
On Riley Street?
Yep, on Riley Street. So we have, families that are still over there, that were over there when she was alive. That it's so cool to see like their generations now and how we've all grown up together, how they still live over there, and to see like her home still representing just being a place that was a safe haven for people. I mean, it just only made sense to be located there, have that as our main point. It just made sense.
It's interesting because, we really haven't even talked about what your organization actually does just yet. And but at the same time, I think you've already described it. You're picking up where your grandmother left off in her community. But you're trying to help out homeless initially,
Mhm.
and then anybody who really needed help.
Mhm.
Now you have a delivery van, you're delivering things,
Mhm.
which of course has become so important for a variety of reasons,
Mhm.
for sure. What I'm curious about, though, is just how busy you became after May 14th.
Man, it was truly nonstop. I mean, we had such an exceptional surge from Monday after the shootings all the way until the end of July. Like, we're just now able to get our footing where we're able to organize again. We're able to really have just a standard ground. We're able to
Well, you're not
have
just
our
acting in the moment, trying to
Yeah.
react in the moment.
Yeah, because I feel like right after the shootings, it was so reactionary. We had so many pop-ups that it was so exhausting, to be completely honest. It was like, we're a small staff anyway, and a lot of my staff works full-time jobs. So it was so hard when it came to the balance, because it put a lot on, my mom, who is my COO. She is retired, but she was there every single day. If she wasn't there, I was there. And then, we had the rest of our family and friends that work full time that are coming over after they get out of work, and they're there until like 10 and 11 o'clock at night, trying to help us sort, trying to help us just gain control. Because, I mean, there was so many donations coming in that we couldn't even get up the stairs. We couldn't get into our location. We couldn't even walk inside. You couldn't open the door the whole way. Like,
Right.
It was so much, and it was so extremely overwhelming. But now it's so manageable, and so much positivity has come out of it. But at the same time, I think it still stands to reason that there's a lot of issues that haven't been addressed. So,
And one of those issues is this. I mean, we can call it a lot of different things, but when the top store was forced to close,
mhm.
the words food desert, food apartheid
Mhm.
became prominent. That
Absolutely.
there are people in this neighborhood, if they don't have this store, they have no options. Did you see that? Did you see that at these pop-up markets that you guys were
So we saw two different things.
Okay.
So the first thing I would definitely say is, yes, you do have that over there. That is the only grocery store, but you have a huge amount of the population over there that already was not going to that grocery store because they can't afford to shop in a grocery store. So they're doing their grocery shopping at corner stores, or they're doing it at, soup kitchens, food pantries, or at Dollar Tree, because that's where they're getting the most for their money.
Okay.
That was already an issue. And then to turn around, and now you have the other side of it. You had a lot of people that did kind of take advantage of it. So it was people that maybe necessarily weren't in need that were taking it, and then they were, reselling it to the
we
people.
did hear about stories about that. They were true, huh?
Yeah, so it was very, very sad. But you also had the people that were so in need, and it was so much desperation that they were going to every pop-up because they want to hoard it, because they know they're not going to get it again. They know that after the media turns its back and, everybody moves on, which you saw over there, you had a huge media rush. And then after a lot of the funerals, all of that died down. So you have the true organizations that have been over there that are helping the people. And now there's like a expectation that sometimes is making it hard for people to meet that need, because now everything has kind of died down.
Right. You're not stepping through pallets of produce to get into your office like you were
Correct.
for a couple of months
Exactly.
there.
So you had that huge influx where, you have donations every single day. You have, our Amazon wish list is linked to my house. I was on first name basis with the Amazon driver because he was coming every day, and it was like 80, 90, 150 boxes being left in behind my gate. And now if we get 2 a week, we still receive donations because we're fortunate, and we have the funding where we're able to, purchase according to people's needs if we, don't have the items in stock. And we receive such an excess where we're able to still meet the need. But I think there's a lot of societal issues that really weren't addressed when it came to this. And so with us still being in the food desert, and then the fact that people have the lack of transportation, so they're not making it to these grocery stores anyway, And then you still have the issue of most people cannot afford that grocery store. Or people still choose canned items over the fresh produce because a lot of people don't know about Double Up food bucks, or they don't know, that they can get these fresh items. It's still so much more expensive, especially after the pandemic,
right,
than it even was before the pandemic. So if they weren't paying for it before the pandemic, they're not spending their money on it now. I mean, a lot of our clients too, they're people that work every day. There's people that make way more money than me, but they can't afford to feed their families because they're paying, over in rent.
Mm-hmm.
Or, they may have 5 children. Well, you have 5 growing children, and that's expensive. They're eating you out of house and home, and you're just barely making enough to make ends meet. So our whole mission is to just offer that fresh, quality produce with our partnerships, with Desiderios or with local farming. We want to offer the best of the best where it's free and it's for any and everyone. It's no income guidelines. We're just taking basic information so we can use that for our records when it comes to the grants. But we're pushing the fresh items. We're helping with, hygiene, with household items. So those are the most expensive things on someone's grocery list. If the only thing they have to do is go to the store and get meats, that's
right,
saving them so much money, and they can come every single week. It's such a wonderful opportunity for people that really find themselves in need. Like my grandmother fed her 7 children off of soup kitchens. So my family knows what it's like to have that struggle where you may not know where you're getting your next meal. Like we were the kids that had hand-me-downs. They had hand-me-downs. My mother didn't have anything new until she was an adult. So it's such an interesting perspective when it comes to how we deal with people and how we approach, especially our clients.
Tesha Parker is with us on Buffalo What's Next, the founder of Rooted in Love, Inc., and Buffalo, helping out those people who need help. And we're getting into that a little bit. And that when you were talking about, and if you don't mind expanding, about some of the stories of the people who were coming or are coming to these pop-up markets. Are you hearing stories? I mean, obviously not everybody's probably going to share everything that they have about their issues, but what kind of stories are you hearing about? What are the circumstances that some of these folks are going through?
I mean, some people just, life hits them. Like we had people coming to us because they lost their jobs after the pandemic, and they maybe have taken a new job, but they work way less hours, or they make less money, or they can't even make it to a store because of the hours that they do work. There's families that they just have so many people. There was a huge uptick in how many seniors we're servicing. Seniors that may be living on a fixed income, and they turned around and now they have custody, or they're, not legal custody, but they have custody of their grandchildren or great-grandchildren because of their family circumstances. So they can't even afford to feed the kids because they didn't intend on having them anyway, So we have a lot of grandparents. I mean, one specific family I think of, like, she has 12 grandkids now that she feeds. And she's like...
12 grandchildren.
12 grandchildren. It's insane to me. But she's like, we're on a fixed income, me and my husband. Like, we can't even afford to feed ourselves. And now we're paying rent. And now we have these kids. Like, they need help with clothes. So we'll send them... We used to take clothes, but now we send them to a partner of ours to get the clothes. If they need furnitures, we have referral agencies for that. So if they need things, like, we have places to send them to, but some people are just a victim of circumstance. Like, who are we to judge? Because
Right.
You never know. That can be any of us. Like, we could lose our jobs and we may find ourselves needing help. So how embarrassing is it, to have to go to an agency in general to already not be able to feed your family, and then, you have to present your income guidelines, and you're told, like, oh, no, you make a little bit too much, so we can't help you, like, and you're turning them away.
Right.
It's just such a sad case, and I don't think a lot of people understand that.
your grandmother would have understood.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting also about her end of life and the start of your organization. It's quite the, you can call it a lot of different things. I mean, coincidence doesn't, I don't think, equal that, but why don't you tell the story?
So my grandmother, she was diagnosed with dementia, and she became very quickly nonverbal. Things were really spiraling downhill, where she had to be moved from her home into a nursing home. And when I started Rooted, it was just something that we were already doing together. You know, we always knew people that maybe needed help. So, okay, I coupon a lot. Let me go and give these canned goods, or I'll give away my furniture. I swore I was moving out of my parents' house for like 6 years before I actually did, because I kept buying stuff and it was just in their house. But, you know, you just meet people that just may need it a little bit more. And, you know, it just was such a wonderful opportunity. When I incorporated Rooted, I went down. I was like running right to her nursing home, and I got there and I'm like telling her, I'm showing her the paperwork, and then she says, "Good job." She's like, "This is wonderful," you know. And she never spoke again, but she passed away right before our first event, and it was such a weird moment for our family, because we had spent the summer, you know, getting everything together. We got the house together. We had all these intentions, you know, oh, we're going to do this first and we're going to do that first. And how quickly things change and align how they're supposed to. You know, it may not be where it's giving up on the dream, but maybe it's just like timing it better. Maybe it's a later in life. And when we got to the point where she had passed away, we were, let's cancel this event. We don't need to do it. And I mean, we always talk about, when we sit around my families together, like, oh, we're so glad we didn't.
Right.
Because that first event, I mean, we had a community Thanksgiving dinner. And so how we used to do it was we would make all the food. So we had 4 households, and we're baking everything. We're making mac and cheese. I mean, it's a full spread. And we would make enough to feed about 400, 500 people, and it would take us days. And the first event fed 347 people, where they were not only able to have a meal there, but a lot of them were able to take stuff to go. And I remember we were crying at the event, because it was just so moving to have so many people there. And there were so many people that were homeless that actually knew my grandmother. And when she first started with her dementia, she would wander. So they were the ones that would find her. So it just was, she was an avid bus rider. So she would go and take the bus, but she would get lost, you know, because she was kind of losing it slowly at first. And they were those people that led her back home and always knew where to go and what to say to her to calm her down. So it was just full circle to see them come to us now. And they're sitting at this Thanksgiving dinner, and they're sharing their stories. A lot of them we had seen, because she always had homeless people in her house.
Right.
So it was just such a jaw-dropping moment, you know, for our family. And it's something that is so pure and sticks with us for sure in our story.
Tesha Parker is with us on Buffalo What's Next for another 10 minutes or so here, talking about Rooted in Love, her organization that has been helping out those who need help here in Western New York. Let's now fast forward back to May 14th and just beyond, and how busy things got. And you told me that your organization went viral.
Yes. What a time.
For most people, they would say that's a great thing. And you say it with a little mix of both, I guess, pride to a certain extent, but also a little bit of exhaustion, because it really it stretched you out.
It really was super stressful. I mean, I'm so thankful. I'm so appreciative, because I think, you know, especially when it comes to Buffalo, like this, unfortunately, the negativity surrounding why we were getting the attention was so unfortunate. It was so sad. And I mean, we knew a couple of people that passed away. We even had, my cousin was in the grocery store when it was happening. I mean, and running out the back. So it was such a scary day for us, especially being located over there. but so much positivity is stemming from it for us. You know,
Give me an example.
We are launching a community fridge partnership with the Meriwether Library, which is right across from the top shooting. It's really taken a mind of its own because they really wanted to do something with the community. Now we have launched a partnership between us, the Delavan Grider Center, Every Bottom Covered, Buffalo Community Fridges, a lot of those organizations that we're really doing the work, and it's so beautiful to see all of our relationships with each other blossom into something better for the community. It's really empowering, and I think, you know, it gives hope to a lot of the younger people because it's a lot of young people running those organizations.
This question came to me as you were talking. These efforts and this spirit, is it something that was always there inside the Black community here in Buffalo, or is it just getting focused upon right now?
I think it was there. I think it's definitely heightened now because of that negative situation having such a racial component. So I think, you know, it leaves a lot of people feeling uneasy, but I think it's a wonderful time for especially minority organizations to really like band together for the community. Like a lot of people want to see that representation. A lot of them want to be involved. They want to have that trust with the organizations. I mean, I can truly say like the people that come to us, like I know they trust us. I know that they love that we don't treat them with judgment. We're anonymous. Like we don't have, you know, huge sign. It's not a arrows pointing outside of our location. So I think having that trust within the community and with the community, it's allowing so much more positivity to flow, at least on our end. I know there are, you know, negative experiences, but I don't even want to focus on that because it's, you know, it's just, where does that get us? You know, it's just, sometimes things don't work and you move on, you know?
Are there the lessons in that though that are worth mentioning? That, you know,
I think there's huge lessons. I think there's huge lessons in, you know, being intentional with who you're aligning with. I think there's huge lessons in being intentional with what you're putting out to the world, especially with this platform right now. I think there's, you know, always going to be a negative stance on every situation. But I think everything that's already come from it, like that situation was so negative with the shootings that for us, like even when we were so stressed, I was just like, but we have to do this. Right. Like we don't even have a choice. We have to do it for our clients. We have to do it for our people. Like I mean, even I have family members that come to us that need help. There's no shame in asking for help. And I think, you know, focusing our efforts on the positive where it leads to the betterment of even communication when it comes to organizations working together or when it comes to us in the community. We just have to do better for each other. And that's regardless of race. We just have to.
Interesting about the idea that people are reaching out and trying to help. One real noteworthy one, I saw it on your Instagram account, Micah Hyde of the Buffalo Bills, unfortunately injured and out for the season. Too bad in a lot of ways there, but that's a side story. But he came through for your organization. His foundation did.
Yeah, Micah Hyde is fantastic. He's such a wonderful person. And that team at Imagine for Youth, Tracy, Amanda, Micah, all of them are such beautiful people. I mean, I've known them for a couple years, and you know, after the shootings, Micah really wanted to do something where it was a huge statement. He wanted to be able to say he was really giving back and not just like donating to the funds that were set up, but stepping beyond that and meeting, you know, face to face when it came to community organizations that were actually operating on the East Side or, you know, getting on a call. I have a great relationship with his team over there. And Tracy, I mean, a couple weeks ago, he called me up. He was the one that told me, you know, hey, I know you guys are trying to get a delivery truck. We're going to be offering delivery after the first of the year. But he was like, we want to help. So even if we can give, you know, $5,000, like what can we do? how can we help make it better? And, you know, they've been so good to us. Michael was the first Bills player to ever donate to Rooted. So it was something that came so full circle, because that was back in 2019 that he donated to us. And it was our little prize check. Like we were like, all like, we should frame this. It came from Micah Hyde. So it's so beautiful to see, you know, years later, we still have that relationship. And now the NFL has chosen to match his grant. So it's such a blessing when it came to that truck, because now we're able to get ready to service so many more people that really, truly do need it.
What about for someone else who wants to help right now? What can they do? Do you have a fundraiser? You have fundraisers, or what can we look forward to here?
So definitely, we're always accepting donations, either in person. We're open every Saturday at 670 Riley. We do have our Give Butter campaign that's live on our website, so that's year round. But on November 25th, we're partnering with Resurgence. So the day after Thanksgiving, we're partnering with Resurgence. We're going to do a jazz night, and it's going to be called Rocking for Rooted. So we have a couple local jazz bands and acts coming out where we're just going to have appetizers. We're going to have just a good time, a good theme tray auction where we're able to just pack the house and raise some money for Rooted, especially with the start of next year.
Can folks find out more on your website about that?
Yep, so it'll be listed early next week, Monday morning on our
another
website.
Thing on your to-do list. Just what you needed.
But it'll be listed. You'll be able to get tickets, so it'll be a really beautiful night.
Final question, or one of the final questions we have here. What does the East Side need? What does the East Side of Buffalo need? What we talk about what's next?
Yeah.
What's needed?
I think truly what's needed is, it's going to be, I hate to say it, and put a focus on it, but it's the money. It's, you know, people that want to believe in giving opportunities to people that you may not want to deal with every single day. I mean, we've been yelled at, we've been screamed at, we've had protests at our events, and we still get up every day, and those are the people that we want to help the most. So I think looking past the negativity, right now there's people that are truly so hurt, and the East Side needs so much healing when it comes to the mental health, when it comes to just the compassion when helping. I think it's crucial to just, even if it's feet on the ground, volunteering with the organizations that truly don't, they're smaller. Us, you know, a lot of the other organizations I mentioned, they need the volunteers. They need the monetary donations to help keep them going. They need the good words and encouraging notes that are sent. I think especially building up that trust again is definitely needed.
Tesha Parker, I encourage everybody to find out more about your story at rootedinloveinc.com. Thanks for sharing with us on Buffalo What's Next. This has been Buffalo What's Next. Thanks to Terry Alford from the Michigan Avenue Heritage Corridor, and of course Tesha Parker, our guest here on Buffalo What's Next. We're back with you tomorrow at 10 on WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown, your NPR station.